This week we are off to South Africa, and I'm delighted to introduce a couple of guests that we have joining us. We've got Mick from Craven, and we've got Wes from the Royal Portfolio in South Africa. So let's hop on a plane, and we'll fly from Houston, connect through Europe, and then land in Cape Town. And this is one of my favorite countries in the entire world. I was fortunate enough to visit a few years ago, and it's such a diverse country, and Cape Town, in my opinion, is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And it's naturally gorgeous. The landscape is just like, unlike anything else. You've got these beautiful beaches surrounded by this epic mountain range. You've got Table Mountain, the 12 Apostles, and then Lion's Head. Not to be confused with my company, LIONHOUND, which is also named after an African dog breed, but I digress. So most of you guys, when you think of Africa, you probably think of safari. You think of the wildlife experiences that really make it special, but there's so much to do beyond just the safari experience. And Cape Town is kind of the perfect place to get that started, to kick off your trip. It is such a cosmopolitan city, and it's super rich in history and art and culture, and it's absolutely beautiful. The best times of the year to visit, in my opinion, are going to be in the American fall and winter, and even a little bit into the spring. I think the weather's warm, the water's not quite as cold, and it's just absolutely beautiful. You can take advantage of the daylight. You can explore the city outside and enjoy everything that it has to offer. Typically, flying from the United States, you'll touch down in Johannesburg first. Before everything COVID kind of started, Washington, D.C. had direct flights to Johannesburg, and so that was kind of an easy way to start your trip in Houston, connect through DC, and then either fly to Johannesburg. And that's just a good way to avoid traveling there if you don't want to go through Europe. However, like I mentioned at the beginning, we do have a guest who joined us today from the Royal Portfolio, which in my opinion is one of the most fantastic group of hotels in South Africa. And so our itinerary today for Winetown Wednesday follows one of their itineraries through South Africa. So you really get to experience the highlights of Cape Town, of Franschhoek, Stellenbosch, Paarl, the winelands, Hermanus down on the coast, and then ending in Kruger National Park, where you'll get to spot the Big Five. So what else is there to do in Cape Town? I know we have a lot of hikers on this trip with us as well. And one thing you can do is hike Lion's Head for panoramic views of the 12 Apostles, the City Bowl, which is right here. You guys might recognize that soccer stadium from the World Cup back in 2010. And you have Table Mountain. And this, in my opinion, is best done either at sunrise or sunset during the summer months, so you can have some really awesome lighting. If you're not into hiking, the cable car or the cableway is a really great way to get to the top of Table Mountain without needing to exert so much physical energy. Boulders Beach is a fantastic place to spot penguins in the wild. They're super little, they're very curious, and it's just a beautiful beach with bright blue water and white sand and a penguin colony. Muizenberg Beach is a rainbow. There are all these rainbow colored beach houses, and you can go down to the coast and photograph the beach houses, take a surf lesson, something like that. The Bocap neighborhood is a super rich neighborhood in food and culture, and it's very colorful. Another place that's a dream for a photographer. And then one other thing I want to talk about is Robben Island, where you can actually take the ferry to Robben Island and you can visit Nelson Mandela's prison and learn about the history of apartheid in South Africa. And I believe that this year actually marks 30 years since apartheid ended. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, my real South Africans here, but that's pretty exciting because the first generation that really grew up in South Africa post-apartheid is really coming into their own now, and they're becoming more prominent members of society and culture and decision makers. So art lovers in Cape Town can also enjoy the largest museum for for contemporary African art in the Silo Hotel. And the Silo Hotel is the first hotel of the Royal portfolio that we're visiting. It is built in an old silo, and the design is incredible. You can see the exterior from in this one photo, and then you can see a picture from inside the bar, these beautiful chandeliers, and it's a bucket list property. There are other properties in Cape Town that you can visit, but this is right on the V&A waterfront, which is the perfect location to kind of access all of the best of Cape Town. So now that we've touched on that a little bit, let's hop in our car and head a couple of hours out of town into the winelands. So Adele, why don't you kick this off and tell us a little bit about the Napa and Sonoma of South Africa. Unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yeah, Stellenbosch is 25 miles east of Cape Town, and it's basically like the Napa Valley of South Africa. It's definitely the wine region to know. It's the most notable, and it produces some of the best quality wines of the region. It's called a district. It's one of the oldest, and it's definitely a very important part of any sort of well-rounded wine portfolio that anyone would ever have, or a collection at home. Just being east of Cape Town, it's also along next to them is French Oak and Parle, which are also other very good notable wine regions to visit. And everything's just like nestled super close together, so you can really make a trip and visit all of these pretty easily without having to travel too far. The region of Stellenbosch dates back all the way to 1679, where Simon van der Stel was credited with founding the town of Stellenbosch. And along with that, the first vines that were planted there happened in about 1690. Which is a long time that vines have been established in this area. They actually weren't the first ones, though. Technically, the history of South Africa dates back to the 1650s with the Dutch East India Company that was basically formed just for sailors on their way to India to restock on their wine and their supplies before heading on their way. But the wines weren't very good. And it took the French Huguenots to come in and sort of revitalize a lot of the wine culture, bringing a lot of education and just overall knowledge of how grapes are grown and how to produce quality wines for things to really improve in the area. So with that long history, you'd think that maybe South African wines would be all over the place and maybe a little bit more popular than they are now. But of course, sometimes history deals you a bad card, and there was a bunch of sort of unfortunate things that happened in South African wine history with phylloxera that decimated almost all the vineyards, along with like many other parts of the world. But then there's also apartheid, some colonial wars, civil disputes, and stuff like that. So it really hasn't been until the 90s, as you said, about 30 years ago, when apartheid was abolished and we were able to receive some of these really cool quality wines that today, South Africa is like the 9th in volume for producing wine in the entire world. They produce about 900 million liters, which is a lot. And almost half of that is exported outside of South Africa to many markets other than the United States. But anyway, back to Stella.
Note real quick about the wine. Sorry to interrupt, Adele, but one thing I want to note real quick about the wine. If you ever want to, if you feel the urge to drink for a cause right now, spend your money on South African wine, because South Africa is still in lockdown because of COVID, and they've been since March when the airports closed, and wine, liquor, spirits are not considered essential businesses. So the sale of alcohol has actually been prohibited. So by buying South African wine here in the United States right now, by drinking this tonight, we're helping the winemakers of that region. So continue, Adele.
And honestly, like, what are you supposed to do? You can't drink, like what? And I know that I read that the reason for this was that so that the hospitals don't become overcrowded with any sort of like alcohol related accidents or overdoses or deaths, just like eliminating that whatsoever. But I mean, like, what are you supposed to do? Like, you're at home, like watching Netflix and just trying to pass the time, be so bored. But anyways, okay, so back to Stellenbosch, the main region in South Africa that you definitely should know. It's a terrain that's mostly hilly. They actually see a Mediterranean climate. They've got good dry growing seasons, and there's a variety of soils. And the best soils that produce the best wines are definitely like the ones that have high granite sort of parts to them. And the vineyards that are on those make some very, very good quality wines. And there's a lot of producers in Stellenbosch, and the ones that use those soil types seem to make like better quality wines. It's sort of just something that we've noticed over the years seems to be a commonality of there. Finding good wine is always a challenge and a pleasure of mine. It's actually my job and stuff like that. And I'm very excited about the wines that we have today that we're gonna drink.
Likewise. Well, when we are visiting Stellenbosch or French Hoek or Parle, the place to stay is La Residence. And this is the perfect little wine retreat that is located in the middle of all of these vineyards. We're continuing with the Royal Portfolio's itinerary, and they have some amazing wine experiences. The chef from La Residence actually sent food pairings to go with the wines that we have today, which I'll be sharing with y'all. And they are just the fantastic compliments to go with what you're drinking. And this place is beautiful. The design in these properties it wows me every time I see it. And this is a perfect little place to just kind of venture out and visit the different vineyards that are in the area. And there are a number of ways that you can visit them as well, whether by horseback, which is what I did when I was in the winelands. There are also scenic flights, there are biking experiences, there's a wine train. And so depending on what your interests are, there are different ways to move around wine country and really see the best of it while you're here. So Adele, why don't you tell us a little bit about the notable wine regions of South Africa that we're kind of touching on today, and then what grapes are well known in the area? Oh, unmute yourself. Wait, unmute yourself. There you go.
There you go. There's a little background noise here at the bar. I just want to make sure that nothing gets picked up. But as you can look at this tiny little map and see all those beautiful colors, those are all of the regions of South Africa that vines are planted under. And most of them seem to be centrally located, like right there on the tip and around. We've got Stellenbosch, we mentioned, French Hoek, which actually translates to the French Quarter, and that was established by the French Huguenots that came in, Parle, Swartland, and then Walker Bay. South Africa has a variety of different grapes that are usually pretty well known. I think a lot of people have heard of the ones that we've had before: Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet, Chardonnay. And so just depending on just like the aspect of the where like the terrain is and the climate depends on where all of the different wines are grown. But I'd say that you are in pretty good hands just flying into Cape Town and taking some wine trips out from there. But as for like the grapes that they're definitely known for, there it is. We've got Chenin Blanc, which they nicknamed Steen, S-T-E-E-N, Steen. So this grape is one of the most planted varieties because they use it to make brandy out of. And although brandy is not in fashion really anymore, they have all of these really interesting old vine Chenin Blanc vineyards planted throughout. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to wine number one. But this is mostly along the Walker Bay region is where you can find some really good ones. But that's not the only place that you can find it. We also have Chardonnay that, if you're to compare it to any other region, it is a cooler climate style Chardonnay. So it takes a little bit more of like an old world variety to it, profile. And then of course we have some Sauvignon Blanc, which I would highly recommend if you like New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs, like the ones that we had last week. And they're usually fairly inexpensive and you want to try something similar but different, look for South African Sauvignon Blancs for really good value. And then we have some Bordeaux grapes. This Bordeaux grape, like word term, kind of like it's Cab, it's Merlot, it's Cab Franc. Bordeaux grapes. And then we've got some Shiraz, which sometimes is called Syrah. Shiraz and Syrah are the same grape. And the only difference really is the intention of the winemaker of the finished product. Shiraz, when it's labeled as such, means that it's going to be fruitier, bigger. And then the Syrah means it's going to be a little bit more austere, mineral-driven, and a little bit lighter, sort of emulating the northern-bound French-style Syrahs. And then lastly, one other grape that we're going to get into shortly is Pinotage, which is a signature grape of South Africa. It's basically their own variety, and it's actually created intentionally. It is a hybrid, a cross between two different grapes, Pinot Noir and Cinsault. But we'll get a little bit more into how Pinotage has been one of my least favorite grapes of all time.
Well, Adele, would you like to let's get into our first wine of the evening, and why don't you welcome our first guest?
Yay! I'm so excited about this one. We are starting with the Chenin Blanc from Craven, and I believe we've got Mick Craven on the call or on the episode who's going to hang out with us.
And Mick, you're joining us from South Africa, right?
I am. That is true. How's it
Welcome.
going?
Thank you for staying up so late to be here with us today.
Well, it's I actually went to bed, so I woke up for this now. Yeah, that's good.
Well, it's a delight to have you, and we're super excited to be sharing your wine this evening with all of our guests. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Craven, about the history of the vineyard, and what it is we're all drinking today?
Cool. Well, I won't go into the full deep story because it's probably going to take 2 hours to do that. But I guess the short of it is Craven is it's just a little sort of family-run business. So it's my wife and I. Janine is fast asleep upstairs. So yeah, what we do, Craven is all about just making honest, authentic, really sort of single vineyard-driven wines from Stellenbosch. So everything we make is 100% made from vineyards in Stellenbosch, and everything we make and you'll drink is from one particular vineyard. So as you can see on the little picture here, this is actually the vineyard from what you're drinking or whoever's drinking the Chenin. So that's our Chenin Blanc vineyard, which is quite cool. It's a pretty special time of the year. This is about 2 weeks ago, this photo. So as you can see, it's winter for us. It's freezing cold. The vines are dormant. And as you can see, just underneath our row, the vines, we've put this thick layer of mulch. For us, all our viticulture is tending towards organic now. We really want to, when we make our wines, we don't really add anything except a little bit of sulfur. And so to do that, we really want to farm attentively and sustainably. So we don't, spray any nasty herbicides or pesticides. So this mulching process, which we do every few years in winter, really sort of enables that. And then you can see the lovely sort of cover crops in between. So yeah, I mean, Stellenbosch, for those that haven't been, is, as Kristen was saying, it's a pretty remarkable place. It's a stunning, beautiful, amazing place to come drink wine, and yeah, it's a great area.
I was fortunate enough to spend Christmas in Stellenbosch back in 2015, nice. And it was one of the best Christmases ever. Just the mountains surrounding it, it's so picturesque, it's so scenic, amazing food, amazing wine. So awesome. What, in addition to Chenin Blanc, what are some of the other wines that you guys are producing on property?
So we take fruit from a bunch of different properties actually, but they're all in the same sort of little area of Stellenbosch, in an area called the Polka Dry, or one other area actually as well. So we used to do about 8 different wines, but we've narrowed it down to 6 now. So we do the Chenin Blanc, of course. You have to make Chenin Blanc. That's what we do. And then we also make a Chardonnay, a skin contact or skin fermented Pinot Gris, which has this sort of beautiful orange color. A lot of people in Texas love it for some reason, but that's great. It goes really well with barbecue if you find it. And then we make a Syrah, a very sort of spicy, sort of 12.5% Syrah, a straight Cabernet, and a Cinsault, which is another amazing grape of South Africa. it's a grape that you don't really see a lot by itself around the world, but in South Africa we've got a lot of the grape, and it just goes really well on these sort of beautiful granite soils we have. Yeah, so that's it.
So what's your favorite thing to eat with this particular wine?
I'm useless at food and wine pairings. I drink anything with any food.
Don't think of it as a pairing. Like, what do you eat with this wine?
Pretty much anything on a braai. A braai for us is a barbecue.
Yeah.
So we use a lot of wood. We use a lot of fire to cook our food. We do eat a lot of meat, but what this wine is really good is like a really big, like a nice whole fish on the braai, like a proper fish barbecue.
Nice.
That's what really works with this wine, we feel. I mean, the Chenin where we get from has this really great acidity to it, but it also has a depth and richness to it that sort of works beautifully with seafood.
Love it.
Did you say snook, Mick?
Oh, snook's a tough one, eh? If you get a good snook, it's great, but there's too many bad ones out there. More of a yellowtail.
Got you.
And Mick, what was special, or was there anything special or that really stood out about the wines in 2018?
2018 was a funny vintage. I'm not sure if a lot of you had heard, or we were going through a pretty crazy water situation here, a drought situation in South Africa, where it almost got to the point where Cape Town ran out of drinking water. But it was only the winter of 2018 that got us out of it. So the few years leading up to 2018, we had this serious drought, and obviously, without water, the vines can't grow as much, but so they give a lot less grapes, it's a good and a bad thing in some sense. You don't get a lot of grapes, which sucks because you can't make a lot of wine, but what you get is very intense and very concentrated. Mm-hmm. So the 2018 wines have this lovely sort of intensity and purity to them, which you don't get in a lot of other years where you do have a sort of a higher crop. So it was a really good year from that perspective. So it's a more of an intense, sort of vibrant year than other years. But stressful. It kind of sucks. Droughts aren't fun. At all.
The grapes make you work for it, right? If they're going to show really beautifully, they're going to put you through hell to get there. So
yeah, but it's part of the fun.
Yeah. Well, Mick,
exactly.
We usually save our little Q&A for the end, but since it is the middle of the night there, I want to give everybody just 5 minutes or so, if that's okay with you, to jump in and ask you a couple of questions before we move on. So guys, if you have any questions for Mick, you can unmute yourselves and you can ask him, or you can type them to me in the chat box and I'll jump in and ask him. But Sarah does want to say thank you for joining us and for waking up to be here.
No problem. I'm used to it now. I've done the US is actually our biggest market, so I've done a lot of these Zoom things in the middle of the night. So it's not a huge stretch for me at the moment. It's kind of sad. I much prefer to be sitting in Texas doing it face to face, but this is the crazy world we live in, I guess, right now.
Well, at one point when you are here visiting us in person, please reach out and let both me and Adele know, because I know so many of the people on this call would love to taste here with you in Texas in person.
Sure.
And once borders open and we can travel, I know many of them would love to come see you as well and visit your vineyard firsthand.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I've got a question. So as I mentioned earlier, like I would be bored out of my mind if you couldn't buy alcohol. I mean, what do you do? What do you do? Like, how do you put time?
Well, luckily we make wine, so we never run out of wine. I'm guessing this call isn't getting broadcasted to the authorities. It's not like we don't sell wine. Like, wine does disappear out of our garage. We just accept payment later. It's a ridiculous situation, and obviously I don't want to go into the political nature of it all, but it's a crazy thing to just cut off the sales. It's not the sort of knock-on effects are what really get to me. I mean, we export probably 90% of our wine. So in terms of Craven, we'll survive. We'll be fine. We export, we're still okay. But it's, you know, all the restaurants that can't serve alcohol. It's all the little wine shops that can't sell. And, you know, those guys support thousands, I think, you know, hundreds of thousands of people in this country. And this country isn't exactly in a position to withstand massive job losses. So from that point of view, it's really devastating, really sad to see what's happening to the industry and the follow-on industry. I mean, you know, the glass manufacturers and the packaging manufacturers and everyone. So there's a huge knock-on effect from some pretty asinine decision-making. But in terms of drinking, we drink, we carry on. You know, we know people that make beer, we know people that make wine, so we're fine. I just feel sorry for people that don't. And to be honest, everyone can buy wine. It just costs a lot of money now.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys know Prohibition well. What happens in Prohibition? You can still buy it. It's just, yeah,
people just
different.
Creative.
Just ask the Kennedys.
Yeah.
So I've got another question that is maybe just like a little bit more of like a technical question, because Chenin Blanc is one of my favorite grapes. I always love it from the Loire Valley, and I try to like collect like things from back vintages of Nicolas Joly, like Savennier and stuff like that. I like your wines a lot because they to me like have more of like a Loire Valley kind of thing going on. How would you say the ageability of like your Chenins might withstand to maybe something like of the Loire?
I think it depends how you make your Chenin here. I mean, a lot of people tend towards the bigger, richer sort of style. And the thing is, the one thing we don't have compared to the Loire in general, or Europe in general, is acidity, natural acidity. I mean, we're quite a warm climate. And if you're not picking your grapes early enough, you run into the problem of not having enough natural acidity and slightly higher pH. Sorry, this is a bit technical. But for a good ageability, I believe that like a really good pH and a nice fresh acidity is quite crucial for long aging. So what we do is we actually pick quite like very early. That's why we're in the 12.5, 13% sort of alcohol range. We're not picking it to have low alcohol. We're picking it to have a higher acidity and more vibrancy and freshness. And we feel by doing that, we will get more ageability out of our wines. I don't think we're going to age as long as, you know, the great wines in the Loire, but it's just a different style, to be honest. Yeah.
Thank you.
But it is fantastic grape.
Nick, we have a question from Mary.
Yep.
She is wondering, what's the bump winter crop between the rose and the photo? And is that standard to work towards organic sustainability or for another reason?
So in this photo, every year in our vineyards, we plant cover crops. So yeah, cover crops are very useful for a few reasons. They not only feed your soil, so you're planting, particularly in this one, I'm just trying to think what we planted this year. Strangely, the yellow stuff we didn't plant. It's we call it rumnus, or it's wild mustard basically. And some years in Stellenbosch, we just have these crazy years where rumnus or wild mustard grows everywhere. Whereas some years it doesn't even come up, which is kind of strange. But within that, you can probably see a little bit of wheat or oats. We plant a lot of oats, which is our sort of carbon source. And then we also, in this vineyard, we planted lupins, bitter lupins. You sadly can't see them yet. I think now they'll start showing, they go crazy purple, like very vibrant and purple. Yeah, so the major reasons we plant them, firstly, is to feed the soil. So, I mean, obviously every year the vines go through a pretty crazy process of extracting a lot of food from the soil. So instead of using sort of nasty synthetic fertilizers and stuff, we plant carbon and nitrogen sources. And doing that, it also increases your soil structure and also water retention. So sort of in a couple of months, when they sort of start to slowly die off, we'll roll them down flat, and they sort of create like a nice mat on in between the rows. So when we do get rain, it sort of traps it in the soil. So, I mean, a lot of people do this without going down the organic pathway, but it certainly really does help if you want to go down that pathway as well. It's a way of keeping your soil healthy and vibrant. Yeah, which you need to.
Sure.
You need to look after your little guys. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just a quick question on that one. Are you guys one of the only people in the area doing this, or are there is this common practice to find people kind of doing the organic biodynamic thing?
It's not that common actually down here, sadly. More and more people are slowly going down this pathway, which is good. You know, a lot of even some of the bigger farmers that we've worked with in the past and still work with in the past, who were heavily reliant on things like Roundup and that sort of stuff, are moving away from it, which is very interesting to see. But, you know, the thing is, a lot of farmers just can't go down this pathway because it just doesn't make financial sense for them, which is each their own. I mean, we would love everything to be grown like this, but we understand each their own. But more and more people are starting to, especially people that are making, I guess, a bit more quality and focused wine, are starting to really think about what they're doing in the vineyard, which is important, as we know. Yeah, so I think it's a long battle, but we'll get there. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mick. It was a pleasure to have you. And of course, you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like, but I'm sure you're really tired. So we really do appreciate you joining us this evening and for participating. And
excuse me,
Yeah.
Mick, you can't get off yet because you all may not know this, but today is Kristen's birthday. So I think we all need to sing happy birthday to Kristen. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday
to you.
Happy birthday
to Kristen.
Happy birthday to you. Awesome.
Sorry for being here and celebrating it with me.
Kept that quiet, sneaky.
Well, thank you guys so much, and thank you again, Mick. It was a pleasure to have you.
Awesome, guys.
Adele, why don't I pass it back to you, and why don't you tell us about the next couple of wines on our list tonight?
So if you have purchased all three of the wines, we are on the second wine of the choices for today. So we're going to move on next to a red wine, and this is the Painted Wolf Guillermo Pinotage 2018. So we are actually transporting just a little bit over to Swartland, which is where the grapes are sourced from, but the winery itself is actually located back in Stellenbosch. So it's sort of roundabout. We're pretty much only in Stellenbosch for today. But the history of this wine starts with two people, a husband and a wife. Their names are Jeremy and Emma, and they, along with some very generous funds from a few friends that they collected, decided to start a winery. But they wanted to start something with the intention of giving back to the South African bush. So all the sales from Painted Wolf are actually donated to the Botswana Predator Conservation Trust, along with endangered wildlife trusts, and also a conservation that protects natural endangered African wild dogs. So Kristen, I thought that you would really like this wine, being one who has domesticated breed of African dog. Well, one of them is. Maybe the other one might be a little wild still. But they make really cool wines. They try to source from two different sites in Swartland that are all certified organic. Again, trying to like protect like the African bush is definitely in their philosophy. And they own their own vineyards, and through just making really good quality wines have gotten some really good attention of awards and accolades, and of, you know, people in general. I personally do not like Pinotage. It is one of my least favorite grapes, like, of all time, but I like this wine, and it's hard to admit that. But I just want to touch for a little bit on like why Pinotage is the way that it is. And maybe a lot of people haven't even heard of Pinotage, but I feel like if you're ever just like studying wine or starting to get into it, and you are looking at the wines of South Africa, you have to talk about Pinotage, and the fact that it's not a naturally occurring grape. It's a cross of two different grapes. They took Cinsault, which is a French grape, Pinot Noir, another French grape, and they crossed it together. And this is in 1925. And so this grape is less than 100 years old. But the reason that they crossed these two grapes together is that they were trying to find something that could work better in South Africa's climate. And they grew Pinot Noir, but they just observed that it just struggled too much and just wasn't producing well enough. So the idea of this cross was to produce a wine that was as delicious as Pinot Noir, but grew as well as Cinsault, which is the other grape that's in this cross together. The result was unexpected, and that the grape itself is actually extremely dark in color, which they didn't think would happen, being that Pinot Noir is very light and Cinsault is kind of medium. But along with that, this grape is generally pretty bold in tannins and can be very different in flavor. And because this grape also is a very productive grape, it makes very low quality wines, which is why I've often hated Pinotage, is because it can be stretched. Like a winemaker can stretch this wine and make it really thin. Also, like bad Pinotage, like when it's bad, it smells like burnt tar, like freshly laid asphalt, burnt tar, and kind of like nail polish remover. Usually cheap Pinotage tastes like bad Pinotage. Kristen, I know that you've definitely had some bad Pinotage in your life for sure. But when good Pinotage is made, which really hasn't happened maybe in the past like 15 years, that some winemakers are going in with knowledge and with the intention of like making really good Pinotage. And when it's done right, which is, I think in this example of Painted Wolf, it's plum, it's blackberry, there's licorice. The wine to me has this like, almost like an aniseed, like a phenolly aniseed sort of thing. But there's also like a sweet pipe tobacco. Other my tasting notes I got was like black tea leaves, kind of like a dried leaf thing. But then on the palate, it has good acidity, it has good tannin, it's not overly extracted. It's a really nice example of what Pinotage could potentially be in the future, as maybe something, a force to be reckoned with, if you will. So I'm curious to see if anyone else is drinking this wine, if you guys enjoy it as well, because again, Pinotage is usually not something that I sell at 13 normally and that we normally push for this, but I thought for this class, this is the best Pinotage for the money that I've tasted here in Texas.
And I'm glad that we featured this wine. I feel like it's you can't visit South Africa through the lens of wine and not talk about Pinotage. So I think it is an important grape, both economically, and it is cool to have one that is actually accessible and that's actually good. And not only do I love the African dog thing, but I do love the conservation aspect of that too. That's something that's really important to me personally. And so I love that there are wineries in South Africa that are dedicated to doing that. I think that's really fantastic. So Adele,
and I guess Painted Wolf means like the wild dogs, like that's what they call them. They call them painted wolves.
Yeah, so it's so wild dogs are super. They have like super complex social systems, and they communicate really well with one another, and they're predators and they're endangered as well. And so I know there's been a lot. I know there have been many initiatives to protect the wild dogs, and it's fascinating to watch them. If you just like go to YouTube and type in wild dogs and lions, you can find all these videos of how wild dogs will interact with not just lions, but with other animals in the bush, whether from it's a self-preservation standpoint or whether it's from a strategic hunting standpoint. And so they're just fascinating animals, and it's pretty cool. It's like they're pretty special. So let's keep things moving along with the show tonight, and let's get into our next wine this evening.
So then we're going to transition to our third wine of the night. This is the Red Jasper from Rotz. Rotz Family Wines. They were founded in 2001 by two brothers who were focused solely on crafting wines that emulated the styles of the Loire Valley. So they mostly work with two grapes, Chenin Blanc and Cabernet Franc, which are normally from South Africa. And they decided to make like a very small family-owned and operated winery, but now they have, and very quickly, I think, established themselves as being like a new world go-to if you're looking for that style of good quality Chenin Blanc and Cabernet Franc. So the red Jasper is a red blend, and if you flip it over on the back, it's 60% Cabernet Franc, 31 Malbec, 7 Petit Verdot, and 2% Merlot. So most of the reds that they do are going to have a heavy component of Cabernet Franc. Franc to me always has that good tannin structure, medium bodied, has like those red fruit flavors like strawberries and raspberries, and it has that very interesting thing called pyrazines, and that's when you taste the pleasant green bell pepper kind of thing, which is a characteristic of Cabernet Franc that makes the wines like really interesting. And I think you get that in this wine. And there's also this very, very cool like toasted espresso, dark chocolate shaving, kind of like middle note to it. Then it finishes like very, very velvety and sexy. I would say like pairing wise, this is your dark chocolate wine. This is definitely something that you would have with either a box of chocolates or some like chocolate brownies or something like that. If you're not into sweets, another food pairing, which I thought would be kind of interesting, is your rosemary rubbed lamb chops. So you're getting that sort of like green rosemary kind of thing, but then your savory smokiness of the lamb chops to complement with the wine. I think this is definitely like a fun interpretation of a big blend from South Africa that definitely has that South African terroir in it. It tastes like wines from South Africa that are really good quality and complex and well structured.
I love it. It sounds delicious, and I wish I had this open and was drinking it right now, but that'll have to wait just a little bit. Adele, this wine, so the other two wines that we had tonight were from 2018. The Jasper's from 2016, I think. Do you know anything about 2016 as a vintage and how this particular year stood out?
I don't know anything about this vintage in particular, but I do know that this is the current release that we have here in Texas, which means that either the importer or the producer intentionally wanted to age this wine. And when doing some research on the website about this wine, they recommended 10 years of aging. Like this is something that gets better after it's spent a little bit of time sitting and just really thinking about itself. There's nothing worse than opening up a bottle of wine that's angry to be awoken and is very, very grumpy. This wine, I think, is showing its potential. It has great aromas and fruits and drinks really well now, but I think it would be even better if you were to lay it down for another 5 years.
Well, that's really cool. That's good to know. Maybe I'll do that then. Maybe I'll keep this guy for a little while.
I did just have a private question I thought was kind of interested from the Rambys that were asking about that green pepper quality thing, and they asked if it drops like over time, and it does drop over time. The green bell pepper thing can also be overshadowed by wines that are overripe in structure and have higher alcohol. Will kind of like just kind of glaze over that green bell pepper kind of thing too.
Interesting. Well, thank you, Adele. Let's continue our journey through South Africa. Since we got a little bit of a late start, I want to keep things moving, and we're going to hop on the road again and head back to the coast where we'll visit Hermanus. And so Hermanus is this coastal town that is south of Cape Town, and it's kind of known as the Riviera of South Africa. And not only do you have these beautiful cliffs and beaches that kind of go out into the ocean and this natural beauty, it's fantastic for fishing, and you do have some amazing wines from this area as well. We don't have any of them open today, but if you ever have a chance to try the wines from here, this is something that's a little bit different. And I had one recently that just rocked my world. It blew my mind. It almost had a little bit of like that saline quality to it, being so much closer to the ocean with some of that coastal influence that made it really cool. And Hermanus is a perfect place where you can really enjoy some more of these outdoor activities. You can do some bird watching, but the biggest draw, in my opinion, is the marine wildlife. So with that, let's check into Birkenhead House, which is the third property on the Royal Portfolio's itinerary through South Africa. And this is the property. It's this little boutique hotel that sits on the cliffs. It overlooks the beach, and you can see the whales from that patio. You can sit there with your binoculars and watch the southern right whales going by. So with that, I'm going to introduce our second guest tonight. Wes is actually joining us from the Royal Portfolio. And if there is anything of note that I missed about the Silo or La Residence, he'll tell you guys a little bit about it. But he's going to dive in a little bit more into the marine safari and the land safari experiences that can round out your trip to South Africa. So Wes, welcome to our Wind Down Wednesday event.
Thanks so much, Kristen. Thanks for having me. And lovely to meet everyone, and happy birthday again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm listening to this whole presentation. I'm missing South Africa myself. I'm based in Victoria in BC, Canada, and recently immigrated in January. So definitely missing home through listening to all of this. But yeah, been with the company for 5 years, and just to give you a little bit of history, it's owned by the Biden family in Cape Town, not related to Joe, but they had these holiday homes across South Africa in key destinations, and 2 of them have just been covered, Cape Town and Franschhoek, and now Hermanus. And they converted these holiday homes into little boutique hotels, and kind of created this incredible circuit where you get to experience these key destinations across South Africa. Yeah, so Hermanus, I spent 2 years working at Birkenhead House, and what an incredible little boutique hotel, a real beach chic house look to it. And it's small enough for us to really create a real personalized and intimate experience for our guests. Just to touch on the wine region, the Hummel Valley is known for its Pinot Noir and Chardonnay because of the lovely climate, the cool climate, and that cool evening air that goes and settles into that valley. So yeah, wonderful Chardonnays and Pinot Noir, probably the best in the country, in my opinion. You're going to find in Hermanus. And just on the vintages, we spoke about vintages earlier. If anyone ever comes across a 2015 bottle of red from South Africa, which is very unlikely, but if you do, grab it straight away. It was the best year for reds, and just produced some incredible, especially your big bold reds from Franschhoek and Stellenbosch and the Swartland. Anyway, back to the coast. What a lovely town. Hermanus, known for its southern right whale migration. Every year these whales come in through from Antarctica, and they start coming through around about June, and by December they've all headed back to Antarctica, and they come to the bay to calve and to mate. The cows will carry for 13 months after mating season, and then return the following year and come and calve. And Birkenhead House is just a wonderful location to view these whales from. It's really not a shy whale at all. The humpbacks and the bridle whales tend to be a lot further out, but these southern rights literally come just behind the surf and play around and splash around with their calves. So really an incredible experience, and we pre-book all our guests that come to Birkenhead House on a whale watching tour on a boat or on an aeroplane. But so many of our guests will arrive and want those tours cancelled because it's so amazing just to enjoy it with a glass of wine or a mojito and a light meal on the front deck. Yeah, so much to do in Hermanus. It's another big activity is the great white shark cage diving. We've had a little bit, maybe quite a big issue in the last few years with this, we've had 2 orca brothers that have come into the bay. I'm not entirely sure where they've come from, but it's unheard of in South Africa to have orcas come into the South African coast. And they've come in and they are feeding on these great whites, and particularly the liver of the great white. And so they have been roaming our coasts up and down between Hermanus and Cape Town. And as soon as they enter, these great whites disperse. So definitely affected the shark cage diving. But speaking to the guys back in Hermanus lately, the shark cage diving has been great the past 2 months. So let's hope that continues. And besides that, activity-wise, I mean, there's beautiful hikes, mountain biking, and just lovely strolls along the cliff path from Birkenhead House all the way into town, which is just a lovely activity. I often get asked, where do you fit Birkenhead House into a trip to South Africa? And I think Kristen's itinerary has been perfect, with starting with Cape Town, going through to the winelands, and then heading to Birkenhead House, where you can just rewind and relax after a busy time in Cape Town and a lot of wine in the winelands, and heading to Birkenhead House and just
enjoy the wildlife
and enjoying, absolutely,
watching it come by. We had a quick question. When is whale watching season in Hermanus?
Yeah, so they start coming through from June, to be safe. When I was there, we started seeing the first in May. But we say June, and then by Christmas time, they've all headed back. Your prime season is August, September, October. Those are probably the months that you're going to see the most. And about 3 years ago, we had record-breaking numbers of, I think they recorded over 1,700 southern routes come through the bay, and over 500 of those were calves. So it was phenomenal. I mean, everywhere you looked in the bay, it was just whales breaching and just splashing around in front of the hotel. So it was quite incredible. A lovely activity with our chefs is mussel picking. So these are 2 of our chefs, Pinky and Ziad. And Pinky's been with Birkenhead House for over 13 years from the beginning. She started off as a housekeeper and worked her way up, and she's now an executive sous chef. And she takes the guests out, they pick the mussels, and then she takes them back up to the kitchen and gives them a little mussel lesson, one of her favorite recipes, and then serves it to them for lunch or for dinner. And it's become quite a big activity where a guest will go mussel picking with her, and a guest that's sitting close by will order mussels, and they'll say to that guest, well, listen, I picked your mussels that you're eating right now. So it becomes a lovely laugh, and everyone ends up going mussel picking. So lovely little activity. There's 4 months out of the year where we don't pick mussels, to preserve them and to allow them to regrow. But yeah, lovely little activity.
Like a lot of fun. Adele just jumped in on the question chat box and said she wants to do this right now.
Absolutely. I mean, it's
I love mussels. Yeah,
you do. Okay,
totally
fantastic.
right up my alley.
Wonderful. And
you also mentioned the diving with great white sharks. If anybody on this call is ever interested in doing something like that, I've done it. And so I can speak to that experience if that's on your bucket list. Adele said in the chat, my favorite animal is the shark. And I won't talk about this for super long, but if you don't know, I'm actually in Mexico right now in Los Cabos, and I spent the entire day swimming with sharks, no cages or anything involved. So that's how I choose to spend my birthday. I love them. I think they're just
wonderful,
fascinating, and love the marine wildlife.
Awesome. Awesome.
While we're at it, guys, it's Margot's birthday in a few days.
I know.
Happy birthday to her. We will not embarrass her by singing.
We'll save that for another time. Well, Wes, let's hop on a plane and continue our journey with the Royal portfolio onto, oh, penguins, real quick. But continue the Royal portfolio onto what I think is one of the finest properties in Africa, without a doubt, but probably the world. So tell us a little bit about this beautiful and special place.
Yeah, very special place. Originally, again, was a little holiday home for the Biden family, and this is where the portfolio all started. And Liz decided to build a little lodge and convert this little home of theirs into one of the villas at Royal MALEWANE. But what an amazing place! It's situated in Thorny Bush, which is in the Greater Kruger. And about 4 years ago, they took the fences down between Kruger National and Thorny Bush. So we've had this huge influx of animals coming to and from the Kruger. The game viewing experience is really second to none. The guiding team is really the biggest selling point for Royal MALEWANE. They're the most qualified team in Africa. And it's a real intimate experience with these animals. You get really up close, and you can see with that one photo with the lions. It's really incredible. Something that's been going on now during COVID. Africa has really been hit hard with the poaching, and
oh no!
Fortunately, our guiding team, while our hotels have been closed, they've been working around the clock with the anti-poaching team and the dog units to protect these rhinos and these animals in Thorny Bush, and just done an amazing job. And touch wood, there's been no cases of poaching in Thorny Bush since COVID struck, which is wonderful news for us. But yeah, just such a phenomenal guiding team, and the knowledge that they have is just incredible. Liz Biden comes from a background of fashion. She was the big shareholder in Jenny Button, which is a big fashion company. She sold her shares, and that's how the portfolio came about. So she does all the interiors of all of her hotels, and really incredible what she's done, starting off at Royal MALEWANE, moving over to the Cape properties, and now she's come back to Royal MALEWANE and opened up a separate lodge, but under the Royal MALEWANE umbrella, called the Farmstead. And it's a 3-bedroom, it has 3 luxury suites and then a 4-bedroom villa. Very quaint and small, but really something that you wouldn't expect to see in the bush. It's got so much color, it's contemporary, and such a beautiful little lodge. A lovely story about this little lodge. That it really falls under our community projects within the foundation. This was private land that was bought by the government. It was then given over to one of the tribes in Thorny Bush. The tribe didn't have the money or the resources to do anything with this land. So the Bidens approached them and said, we'll build a lodge on your land. We'll give you a monthly rental. We'll give you a percentage of turnover at the end of the year. And we'll employ the tribe into the fold of Royal MALEWANE and the Farmstead. And at the end of the lease, we'll give the entire lodge back to the community for them to run.
Wow.
So a huge project within the foundation that we're running, and a lovely way to uplift these communities. Just going through these pictures of all the animals, it's really an incredible experience with the animals. I'm sure some of you have done a bit of safari, and you really leave this place a better person. And you arrive and you almost feel a little bit vulnerable. And the staff just take you, and these guides just take you and give you this incredible experience, and you kind of leave everything in their hands and allow them just to give this experience to you. And this is just a picture of Africa House with a 6-bedroom villa. And this is very common. The elephants coming and drinking out of the pools every afternoon.
This could be you guys. You don't even have to hop the game drive to spot the big 5. They're going to come up and drink out of your pool.
Yeah. Very special. So yeah, that's Royal MALEWANE and the portfolio and what they've really created. And I said it earlier, is a lovely circuit where you're able to experience the entire South Africa and their key destinations through this one group, with the same staff and the same protocols that have been put in place now for COVID, which I think is going to be key come post-COVID. But yeah, we would love to invite, welcome all of you to our properties in the future.
And I've gotten a few messages while we've been talking about visiting South Africa and the different itineraries. So I will share that with you guys, some of the itineraries that you can arrange specifically with the Royal portfolio, depending on how much time you have, when you want to go, all of those things, and which properties you want to combine, and you can either add or subtract nights. So I'll be sure to share that with everyone. I'm having just book it. When can I go? When's it open? So
Fantastic.
I know everybody is dying to get there for both the marine and the land experiences, and of course the wine. So we have gone a little bit over today. I do want to give everybody the opportunity to ask you some questions, Wes, if you have a few more minutes. So guys, if you have any remaining questions, type them in the chat box or unmute yourself, and you can introduce yourself and ask Wes directly.
Okay, I've got a question, and this is maybe for Kristen too, but at the very beginning you said something about the big five. What's that?
So good question. These are, so the big five is traditionally from when people went on African hunting safaris. They were the big game animals that you wanted to catch, you wanted to go after. And now there's more of a photographic focus on it. Those are the types of safaris that I plan for my clients, and most of the, well, not most, all of the companies I work with do those types of safaris as well. So we have elephants, we have leopards, rhinos, lions, and the Cape buffalo. So those are the big five, if you ever get that as a trivia question.
Thank you.
Kristen, I have a question for Wes. Your hotels look beautiful. Are they, what is it as a traveler? You know, I love to travel and I like to stay in fine places, but I don't like to have to dress up for dinner and carry a coat and tie or heels to far off places, especially now where, you know, your luggage is so limited and stuff. What is the vibe in the hotels?
Yeah, you know, it's such these hotels are so luxurious and so comfortable, but at the same time so exclusive and private. And everyone is on luxury travel, and everyone is there to relax and wind down. And there really isn't a dress code. And we often get asked by the guests at the hotels, what should I wear for dinner? And it's really such a laid back, and I think it's really the staff that create this for a guest. They're so warm and welcoming, and you eventually feel like you're part of, it's like your home. And I mean, we've had guests come down in their gowns for dinner, and that is really not uncommon at Birkenhead House, especially. But yeah, it's really up to the guest.
When you say gowns, do you mean like nightgowns or
exactly.
like evening gowns?
Well, yeah, an evening gown, yeah. No, a nightgown, yeah.
Okay.
Or they'll finish a spa treatment at Birkenhead House and come through with their gown for lunch. So it really depends on the guest. But I think, you know, once you've arrived, you realize that you really feel at home, and it's really the staff that that bring that feeling about, and everyone kind of just lets everything go and relaxes, and they all themselves. They tend to be themselves. Yeah, so definitely no dress code.
Well, that's good to hear. And one personal question: what's your accent? We're debating it here.
So I'm from Durban originally, but spent a lot of time in Cape Town. So I guess a bit of a mixed accent there with the two cities, but yeah, Durban is home, so I've got a lot of the Durban little sayings and so on, and I guess.
Thanks.
Lovely to meet you
guys. Well, with that, Wes, thank you again for joining us. We really appreciated having you. It was a pleasure to host you as our guest on our show tonight. And if anybody does have specific questions about any of these properties or would like to visit them in the future, you guys know who to get in touch with. Thank you, Adele, as well. And next week, we would like to let you guys know that we will be continuing Wine Down Wednesday, and we're heading back to Europe. So Adele, do you quickly want to tell everybody where we're going to be going these next 3 weeks?
I would love to. As you guys know, I love Europe, and like we started out with Europe and back in April, and we haven't really been back since. So the next 3 weeks, we're gonna do Galicia, Spain, which is like the green part of Spain that's a little bit, under the radar. And then we're gonna go to my absolute favorite region, Piedmont in northern Italy. And then after that, we're gonna do Austria, like around Vienna, Burgenland, Wachau, parts of Austria. So we're going to do those 3 for the next 3 weeks. I'm working on getting the wines in. They should hopefully be here by Friday, so you guys can come by this weekend and pick them up. And if not, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. I feel like we usually see you guys then too.
Thank you guys so much. It was so great to have all of y'all with us again tonight, and we will see y'all next week. Have a good week.
Happy birthday, Kristen. Happy birthday, Margo.
Happy birthday.
How old today?
What's up?
Hi, Kate.
How old?
33.
I'll trade with you.
Margo, how old will you be?
Margo had to leave. She'll be 68. She's the oldest woman. And
I wasn't
never
expecting
let
an
her
answer.
forget it.
Well, have a good one, guys. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
And,
Thanks so much, Kristen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
Take care. Lovely to meet you. Bye-bye.